Howdy folks, this is GM Cody once again, back this week for another RPG review. And also we're going to be talking about some other stuff that I'm doing with gaming, as usual, before I always start these reviews. And we might do a whole series of videos related to this first topic I'm going to be talking about, and that is world building. I've been inspired recently by another GM. He seems to inspire me a lot, to take a look again at my fantasy world. Now, as I was talking about last time, I've had the fantasy bug again. It never seems to go away completely. And in doing so, I always create a different fantasy world. Whether that, usually for D&D, of course, which is probably the most prevalent fantasy game I've played. But that's not always the case. Of course, lately we've been talking about Rolemaster, and that's what we're going to be talking about again tonight. We're going to look at the second book in the Rolemaster series, which is the Arms Law. Rolemaster Classic, that is. And so that should be a lot of fun, but it's not going to, I don't think it's going to take as much time to look at Arms Law as it is to look at the character law. So in order to lengthen this video out, because I like long form videos, we're going to be talking about a little bit about the world I've been reworking. So anytime I've ran a fantasy campaign, all the way back to when I was a little kid of the age of 9 or 10, I always created worlds to go along with those games. Now, used to be, I would usually, every time I'd start a new campaign, I would completely redo my world, or create a whole new world, or maybe not a whole world, but it would be like, you know, a new land or kingdom or whatever for the players to explore. And sometimes, a lot of times actually, I would recycle the same ideas over and over. And so, you know, for, you know, a stretch of a few 3 or 4 or 5 campaigns or whatever, it might be really the same world this last time. I just reworked it. But regardless, I would always basically, you know, come up with a new world over and over and over again. I've never been completely happy with my fantasy setting. And I've mentioned this a few times on some podcasts that I've done and other podcasts and talking to people. I've never been the biggest fan of using published settings. And I don't really know what the reason for that is. I think part of it has to do with, I just never could get into somebody else's setting. I enjoy reading about them. I have plenty of settings back there on the shelf, or shelves, I should say. But I've never gotten into a whole lot of settings. There's a few that have always grabbed my attention, like Dark Sun or Talislanta. You know, the early Forgotten Realms is cool. Like everybody loves that, and early Forgotten Realms, and you know, Greyhawk's cool, and Mystara's cool, and you know, I like all these settings. I just never really got obsessed with them, like some people did, and I never really felt the need to play in them. Even though I have ran campaigns in established settings, like we all have, for the most part, it's always been in my own creations, and I think that's because I can wrap my head around my own creations. Now, the one thing I'll say about my world creations is there's nothing original about my worlds or even my games or anything. I'm the first to admit I'm not a very creative person as far as that's concerned. I do have some original ideas here and there, but pretty much everything is ripped off whole cloth, and I'm not afraid to admit it at all. So, you know, that's one thing I would like to work on, is be more, and I'm not even sure how to work on that, but I've never been like the most like inventive or creative person when it comes to making up worlds and adventures or any of that, really. You know, I just steal ideas, and I think a lot of game masters do. I really don't know if they do or not. I don't listen to too many like game masters talk about how they design adventures and stuff, even though the past few years I've been listening to more, but there's very few that I really appreciate. So I would like to get more creative with that, though. That's I am creative in other ways, but like when it comes to role playing games and being a game master, I'm just the first to admit that I just don't. I'm not that creative. Now, when I was a kid, I probably was. I think I had a seems like, and this probably rings true with everybody. When I was a kid, I had just tons of imagination. But now that when I got into my adult age, that imagination a lot of it seemed to go away, unfortunately. As far as like creative imagination. Now, I have no lack of imagination putting myself in that place and imagining I'm there. But as far as like coming up with something that at least sounds original to me, is pretty hard for me to do nowadays. So, back in, I guess that was, I'm trying to think when that was. I think it was 2018, I want to say. I hadn't really had a solid RPG group. I didn't stop playing role-playing games, but I didn't have like a solid RPG group. And one of my old-time friends, Chase, which, is the co-host on the Grognar Grumbles podcast, and he's going to be joining us for the Prowlers and Paragons game. Me and him were talking about getting another group together. Of course, he had been a constant member of my groups. Me and him have always been involved in the same gaming group since, I don't know, for the past 20 years, really. One way or another, we were like the two constant guys, in the group. So, and usually, after high school, it was usually me and him, they would get a new group together. So we've fluctuated with groups over the years. And, but at that time in 2018, me and him didn't have a group, so I approached Chase. I was like, I don't really remember how it went down, but basically I was like, hey, I want to start gaming again. I want a game master. Actually, I think he approached me. He was like, hey, man, I got these people from work. They're interested in playing role-playing games. They're all new to it. None of them have ever played. One of them has some experience with it. Would you be willing, this would basically give us a new group. Would you be willing to, game master for all of us? And I was like, hell yeah. So, we had a new group. And so the first game I ran for them, I think, was 5th edition, which I've only ran a handful of 5th edition games and never enjoyed any of them. And it quickly turned into me if I don't enjoy myself as GM, I'm not going to continue running a game. And 5th edition, I did not enjoy running. So I was like, hey, would you guys be open to a change of pace? They said yes. And we ended up, I picked out Castles and Crusades, which is a great D&D hack if you guys have never played it. It's basically, I'll definitely do a review of Castles and Crusades because I'm a big fan of it as far as like retro clones or D&D hacks go. It's a really cool game, but essentially it's like 1st edition AD&D updated with some modern mechanics. And some people say 2nd edition AD&D, and I really disagree. I think a lot of the flavor feels like 1st edition to me. I mean, there's some 2nd edition. Anyway, so we're not talking about Castles and Crusades. So this campaign I was running with Castles and Crusades, I was like, hey, it would be really cool to do a different kind of campaign. And that was inspired actually by us running Temple of Elemental Evil first. And I got quickly bored with that. As, mega dungeon. I do love dungeons, by the way, but mega dungeons tend to get boring. And that one got boring pretty fast for me. But the one thing I noticed was at the beginning, the players took control of the keep. If you've ever played Temple of Elemental Evil, in the first module, T1, Village of Hamlet, they clear out a castle keep. So the players went in, cleared the castle keep, and all they were interested in was restoring the keep. And, they were like, hey, where's the deed to this keep? Who owns the keep? And how can we buy the keep? And so I was like, okay, well, you got to clear out the dungeon underneath to clear the keep. And so that gave me the inspiration to do a campaign, where the players get a keep or castle early on and maybe even some lands. And then, basically that whole idea where they're lords and ladies, but like at level 1, right? So I restarted the Castles and Crusades campaign, and this was the idea we came up with. And it was a pretty successful actually a really successful campaign. It was one of my most successful, I think. It was definitely the most memorable for me. And when I created that campaign, I also created a whole new world. And I wanted this world to be the world that I would run adventures in forever. And I thought I was happy with it. But of course, again, like I was saying earlier, I'm never happy with my worlds. And yeah, so lately I've been rethinking this world. So what we're going to look at first is, I'll tell you what we're going to look at first is my original design, which, again, bear in mind, none of this is original. It's all ripped off of different things. I don't care about like originality in names or places or ideas and things, because it was just for me and my players, and it was fun for me just to take little references and shove them into names and stuff. So let's take a look. So this was my first one. All right. Now, I don't remember what we called this. I think we called it the Bay Kingdoms, and most of the adventures took place in Britain. And so Britain was the area that the players really were in, and Darkfall. Just briefly, like, because, again, this world's probably going to change. But Britain was kind of like a Celtic, British type of setting, right? And it was controlled by these noble houses. Sound familiar, right? And the players were thrust into these politics and sent to Darkfall, which is kind of like a lawless kingdom that at one time was controlled by Britain. And the Queen of Britain wanted Darkfall back under her control. So she gave the kingdom of Darkfall to the players, knowing that, you know, nobody else could control it. And if they couldn't, well, it wasn't a loss to her. But if they could reign it under control, that they could have a duchy of their own and be a noble house. And in return, you know, they could bring Darkfall back into the sway of Britain. So that was a really fun campaign. I might talk about that in greater detail later. So yeah, you got Britain, and like I said, it's this kingdom that's like this very Celtic, British, Scottish, fairy tale kind of influence. Then you got the Isles of Ilia, which I didn't realize that I had ripped off. You know, some of these things that are ripped off, I consciously ripped off. I didn't realize Ilia was from Wheel of Time until recently when I was re-looking at these maps. And I was looking at some other maps, like the Wheel of Time map, and I realized, holy shit, I subconsciously just got that name from the Wheel of Time. But yeah, the Islands of Ilia is basically, yeah, I mean, it's basically like Italy and Sicily, almost like Renaissance era, like Sicilian, very much what you think, you know. All these islands are controlled by these families, and you know they're basically like mobster families, like Renaissance mobster families, and there's pirates here and thievery and all that good stuff. So the Islands of Ilia was actually a really fun idea, I think, and I'll probably keep that around, even though I'm going to change the name. And then you have Gascon, and this is an area I didn't really expand at all. We didn't really even like touch on this in the first campaign, but it's basically like an amalgamation of France. Byzantium is basically like a German type area, and they did have encounters with the Byzantians, but they did not in that first campaign. They didn't like actually go to Byzantium. These other areas I never really expanded upon or even talked about. Like, we didn't even really get into it in the first campaign, and I don't really know. I can't even really remember what all these were supposed to be. I mean, Zamoria is pretty obvious that that's like the desert bandit kingdoms. Moravia was supposed to be, you know, very much like a Ravenloft kind of place. I don't really remember what the rest of these were supposed to be. So that was my first map, and that was cool and all. But I think probably what happened. This campaign did end before like the pandemic, and we played some other types of games, and then the pandemic hit, and we weren't doing any gaming. And during that time, of course, we were all itching to game. And when the curtains finally lifted and we could all, go game again, I had been working on a reworking of this map, and so this is the reworking of the map. And this is Britain, but as you can tell, I've renamed it Caledon, and I got a little bit more original with this area. And there's Darkfall down there, still Darkfall. And that campaign took place sometime after the events of the first campaign, a couple hundred years, I think. And so most of the players were dead and gone, but there were legends in the annals of the kingdom. One of the characters was still alive because he was an elf. That campaign didn't last too long. But regardless, I did come up with this decent map here. And I used this map also for a couple other online games and play-by-post games. And actually, I'm not like really unhappy with this map, to be honest, now that I look at it more. But, it still needs some work. So that was that map. And then recently I had the urge to rethink the whole like world in the grand scope of things, and really rethink, reworking this world and making it more original and my own. And so this is what I've been working on. And I'm not even sure, again, I'm not really sure if I'm going to keep this right now or anything. But as you can see, it's very different from what I was doing before. Now I'm thinking about keeping a lot of the same ideas. This is just I'm just a rough outlining everything right now. And I don't even know if I'm going to use this or not. And I might completely rework it. But you can see I'm kind of like coming up with the ideas for some of these kingdoms, which are really just loose ideas in my head right now. So like Caledon would still be the same kingdom as before. And over here would be like that kingdom of Darkfall. So you can see Rouen, which is kind of my French amalgamation again. But it might be something else too. I might like make it more than just a French kingdom. Estolia, another kingdom that I did have in the first campaign I ran, but didn't expand upon. But I like the name Estolia, so I kept that in there. Kingdom of Morn. Again, I'm not really sure if I'm going to keep all these names or keep anything, but it'd be this kingdom over here past the mountains. I like the idea of like a lost kingdom, like just this huge tract of land between kingdoms that's just pretty much deserted. And like from Lord of the Rings, that's really Middle Earth. That's a lot what I'm going with here is I want this world to kind of be the same as it was before, just kind of flipped on its head a little bit and a little bit more desolate feeling. And I kind of like this idea of this just huge tract of land that's just like deserted and broken and, just infested with monsters. And I think that's what this whole like area here, like south of Morn, all the way to the mountains of Vasash are going to be. And Vasash and Zadora and Lys is going to be probably Ilia. Ilion, I haven't like really thought about yet. I'm thinking like these two islands are related and might even throw in a third one here. And Alandis, which I'm going to change that name for sure, but that's going to be like the Elven island, which is not an original idea, I know, and I don't really care, but I kind of like that idea of like these, Elric, Melnibonian type of elves. They're like the real like high elves, and they isolate themselves on this island. And so I might use that idea. But anyway, so that's what I've been working on, and we're not going to go into full tilt here because about like talking about this, because right now I just have rough ideas and sketching things out. I just thought it'd be cool for you to show you guys what I've been like been thinking about. But what we're really talking about today is Rolemaster, and today we're looking at the arms law. So again, this is Rolemaster Classic, which is a reworking of Rolemaster's second edition. Okay. And this book probably won't take us too long to look through. So basically what this is the combat rules for Rolemaster, as well as the combat charts, which we'll see here in a bit. All right, so here we go, arms law. And I'm just gonna, like I usually do, this isn't scripted or anything. I'm just gonna go through here, and I'm gonna read to you. I'm not gonna read you everything, but we're gonna read some the important details, and we're also gonna look at some, maybe some not so important details that I just think are cool. So we've already talked about how you do rolls in Rolemaster in the last video. If you haven't watched that video, go check it out. Here again is the armor maneuver table, which we looked at in the last video. And it breaks down the different types of armor and what those mean. So armor type 1 means you have normal clothing and no armor. Armor type 2 is just robes. So you might have like some robes. Armor type 3 is light hide. Armor type 4 is heavy hide. And then you go into leather base, which is armor class or armor type 5 through 8. Then you go into rigid leather base, which is armor type 9 through 12. And then you go into chain. And chain is armor type 13 through 16, and then plate, which is 17 through 20. Okay. And then we're going to start talking about defensive bonuses. So what's your defensive bonus? And we'll talk about defensive bonus first. What your defensive bonus is, really quick and simple, is when you fight in combat, everybody has a defensive bonus, even monsters and creatures and such. And that's what your attacker subtracts from their roll to hit you after rolling on the tables. Okay? And basically the way you work up that defensive bonus is usually just your quickness, though it can be modified by a shield or a cover or anything like that. Okay? But usually it's your quickness bonus plus a shield. And again, cover helps too. Parrying is a very important thing as well. And shield, like I said, shields give you a defensive bonus, but they also give you a parry bonus. And we're going to talk about parrying here. And we might as well, before we talk about parrying, we're going to talk about offensive bonus. And essentially what offensive bonus is your bonus to hit. And usually that's whatever weapon you're using, okay? Pretty straightforward, so we talked about skills last time and talked about weapon skills, and that would be your offensive bonus. All right, and now we can talk about parrying. And so when you make an attack, the attacker rolls an open-ended roll. They are adding in their offensive bonus and subtracting your defensive bonus, and they're going to look at a chart, which you're going to look at the charts here in a minute, and cross-index with your armor type, and that'll tell you how many hits you did, if you did any hits, and if you did a critical and what type. Okay. So parrying, at the beginning of a combat, you declare how much of your offensive bonus you want to put into your defensive bonus. Okay. And that is called parrying. So how much you can go full on offense, you can go full on defense, or you can split a little bit as much as you want. So say you had an offensive bonus of 50 plus 50, okay? Well, you could put, plus 30 into your offense and plus 20 into your defense. All right. And this is a very important thing in Rolemaster and also, all the other Rolemaster type games like MERP or Against the Dark Master. Pairing's a big deal. And you need to be pairing every combat, pretty much. Now, there's some stipulations to pairing. First off, you can only parry. Okay, well, you can parry as many opponents as you want, but without taking a like an action penalty. Okay, if you parry more than one opponent, you're taking a percentage of your action. All right. Shields. Now, to parry missile weapons, you cannot parry missile weapons with a melee weapon. You have to use a shield, or you have to be in cover. All right. Now, certain weapons get bonuses to parrying, and shields give you a bonus to parrying, and offhand weapons, like if you use their full offensive bonus, give you a bonus to parrying as well. All right. So that's basically how parrying works. Let's see. This is kind of what we were talking about last time, where classes get level bonuses for their skills, and this is just talking about the combat skills. Offensive modifications. This is pretty much all the stuff, normal stuff you'd see in a role-playing game, and this would add to your hit bonus, to your offensive bonus. Like flank attacks, rear flank attacks, rear attack, surprise, stun foe, down foe, helpless foe. And also you get penalties. So if you're wounded more than 25%, minus 10, minus 50, minus 10, minus 75, minus 10. Drawing a weapon, minus 20, changing a weapon, minus 50. And you get a penalty based on your amount of you moved, etc., etc., etc. All right. So let's see. This goes through the different combinations of weapons, different types of weapons. So, you got weapon in a shield, you got two-handed weapons, you got a weapon in each hand, things like that. There's some options in here. One is shield bashing. You can, bash with your shield. And I'm not really actually sure how that works. Let's look. When using this optional rule, a character may use their shield to attack, called shield bash. This attack is treated as a small bash attack for shields with a defense bonus of 25 or less, and a medium bash attack for shields with a defense bonus of 25, higher than 25. If using development for expertise, using one-handed concussion weapons cost. Okay, so you can develop that as a skill. If the skill is used in combination with a weapon, skill with this attack must be developed separately from the weapon, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Let's see. Two-handed weapons cannot be used with a shield. The combatant using a two-handed weapon may use 50% of their OB to parry an opponent using a one-handed weapon. Two-handed weapon in one hand. Two-handed weapon used in one hand applies a special penalty between minus 20 and minus 50 depending upon the weapon. Okay. Two one-handed weapons, which is something a lot of players like to do. You get minus 20 to your OB with your offhand weapon. They can attack with both weapons in the same turn. They can use one to parry, one to attack. Parry DB from the two weapons does not stack. And that's pretty much it. Thrown weapons, you can throw weapons with some modifiers and such. Unarmed combat. So you can engage in unarmed combat, and that is different from martial arts, of course. Unarmed combat is just, brawling and such. Now there's some restrictions to that. You roll on the unarmed combat table, of course, and 50, blah, blah, blah. You get a penalty to parry. Any OB used to parry is cut in half. Okay. Martial arts. There is martial arts. And the martial arts are really interesting in Rolemaster. you develop it as a skill, and there's different levels of martial arts. And in order to obtain the next level, you have to be a certain rank in the first level, okay? And there's strikes, and there's sweeps and throws. And there's also grappling as an option. So martial arts is fairly detailed in Rolemaster and pretty cool. Unusual weapons, improvised weapons, I think is a -50. And then we get to weapon statistics. Again, there's no damage rolled for weapons. All the damage is figured into the weapon charts. But there is, characteristics for weapons. So you have, weight, and you have the fumble range, and you have the range modifiers based on the ranges. It tells you the table to use for that weapon. Armor modifications, this is something like an AD&D most people don't use. And I definitely see the reason not to use it in Rolemaster, because to me, that's already it's already baked into the combat table. So I don't see why you would use this. I've never used it, and I know most people that I've talked to don't use it, but it's there if you want to use it. And, it's just like an AD&D. You get a penalty or a bonus based on using that weapon against certain types of armor. And, it also has special notes for different types of weapons. All right. Tactical combat situation. Initiative. Now, and, a lot of Rolemaster players have mentioned that Rolemaster really never got initiative quite right. And this is not the original initiative system that was in 2nd edition. This is a variant of it. I think that was introduced in the second edition, okay? So not the one I have, but like the red books, essentially. And basically what you do is you roll 2d10 plus quickness plus modifiers. And there's quite a few modifiers. Like if you're using a polearm, you get plus 20 on the first round of combat between, two opponents. Minus 10 after the first round if you have a longer weapon and neither person is charging, you get plus 5. If you have a longer weapon and you're both charging, you get plus 15, etc., etc., etc. Surprise, minus 25, all that good stuff. It also has initiative and monsters here based on their speed code, okay, and their bonus for initiative. And then you declare initial actions, you roll initiative, and you resolve actions, okay? And this, again, was introduced in the second version of 2nd edition, but I quite like it, is the activity percentage table. So you have, 100%, and then you subtract from that taking actions, okay? So to cast a spell is 75% of your action. To move is a minimal of 10% based on a certain amount you move. I can't remember. It might just be like 10% or like 10% of your move or something like that. We'll look at that when we get to the movement. I can't exactly remember how that works. Hiding is 20%. Drinking a potion is 40%. Reloading a sling is 50%. Missile attacks are 50%. Melee attacks are 50 to 100%, depending. So stuff like that. But that's basically, you have this kind of action economy you have to pay attention to. And it's pretty interesting. It can be a little cumbersome, but it's pretty cool, I think. So let's look here. I'm looking at moving. You cannot move any greater pace than run. So, there's different paces of movement. Some actions are better performed when the running starts, such as jumping, leaping, blah, blah, blah. So let's look at the example as a So I think that's literally how it works. However much percentage you move is how much percentage of your action it takes. All right. Here's the rules for option for multiple parry. that we were talking about earlier, which is an option by the base rules. I should have been more clear about that. By the base rules, you can only parry one opponent, I think. Surprise, there's rules for surprise as usual. And these are not very like complex surprise rules like AD&D First Edition. Option 10, resetting initiative, which basically the character can use 80% of their activity for the round, but they can reset the initiative, try to regain the initiative, and they get basically like a plus 10 bonus to their or I'm sorry, it's not. It's a flat number, but they can try to hope to like regain the initiative or go higher in the initiative order, and it's 20 plus quickness bonus plus all modifiers, which essentially, well, I'm sorry, that's actually like, getting the best roll you can get. So, yeah, you're going to move up in the initiative order pretty fast doing that. And these are options, by the way. Option 11, single initiative, combat. Maneuvering and movement. So, you can do maneuvers during combat, and it's pretty much worked out just like maneuvering out of combat. You roll on the moving maneuver table. Your movement rate equals base movement rate times pace modifier times maneuver roll. Okay. So you have a base movement rate based on your quickness. And that can be modified, of course, if you're wearing heavy armor. It's going to, as we saw before, heavier armor decreases your quickness bonus. Thus, it would make you slower. Same with encumbrance as well if you were using all the encumbrance rules. Here's the pace chart for, how much faster you would go. Pace limitations. Encumbrance, again. Exhaustion, like we talked about last time. And you can get exhausted from fighting, which is cool, I think, but also I think it just adds a little bit. It's a little too cumbersome, I think, as well. Then we have more movement, exhaustion, combat resolution. We already talked about how to make an attack and what happens. We talked about in the last video that you can score critical hits. You can also score fumbles, and you roll on separate tables for those. All right. This is an option to wrap around the attack charts. And essentially all the attack charts pretty much max out at 150. But if you roll over a 150, you subtract whatever number you rolled from 150, and you get to hit again on the combat chart. Okay? So pretty cool. Critical strikes. And we're going into, criticals now and how they work. And basically, there's different types of critical and fumble results. So number of hits, of course, is how much hit point damage you do or concussion hits you do. Number of hits per round, this is bleeding damage, and you take that many points per round until you can stop the bleeding. Attack minus, which means you get a penalty. There's also results that don't allow you to parry for a certain number of rounds. There is also stunned, which means essentially may not attack. They may only parry with half their offensive bonus for a certain number of rounds. And the only other actions allowed are movement and maneuvers, but both modified by minus 50. All right. And you also have stunned and unable to parry a number of rounds. You also have down for a number of rounds, you fall to the ground. Out for a number of rounds, you fall unconscious. Knocked back or forth or left or right or whatever. This gives you the effects of bleeding. And knockback damage and all that good stuff. And then we are into combat tables, the real meat and potatoes of this book here. So we're not going to look at all these. We're going to take a look at one combat table, and I'll show you, what I've been talking about this whole time. So you can see here, this is everybody's favorite, the broadsword. So we're going to zoom in a little bit so you guys can see this better. Sorry, I'm making sure you guys can see it. And I think you can see it pretty clearly. Okay, so on the top row here, on the very top box here, it tells you what the number is. It tells you the attack table number. It tells you, some small statistics about the weapon, the length of the weapon, the weight, and the fumble range. So if you roll in this range, you score a fumble. At the top here, very top here that I have highlighted, those are your armor types. And then over here to the left and right, okay, you have the roll results. Okay? So like we were talking about, you make your attack, add your modifiers, subtract their defense bonus, and then you look at the chart. So say you rolled a 100 with a 15. So you would go 100, then we go over here to 15, and that would be 8, which means you would score 8 damage. All right, you see these, the numbers are how much damage you score, and the letters are the critical types, okay? So the first letter, so if we looked like at this one here, like it says 18 DK, what that means is you dealt 18 concussion hits, and you're going to roll on the, you're going to roll on the D crushing table, all right? That's what that means. And, yeah. So, I believe that K is crushing. I'm pretty sure. Sorry, I'm just checking to make sure I'm telling you right. Because it's been a while since I've looked at these. It's been a long while, actually. Critical strikes. Yeah, it's slash, puncture, crush. Sorry, crush table. They used to, I think, yeah. So slash, puncture, crush, grapple, unbalance, and tiny, okay? So those are the critical tables. All right, so that's basically how a combat table works. And as you can see, there are quite a few combat tables. There's not one for every very specific weapon, but it's very specific types of weapons, okay? So broadsword, club, bolas, composite bow, dagger, falchions, flails, etc., etc., etc. All right, so that's the combat tables. I'm gonna jump ahead a little bit. Now, the one credit I will give, I give a lot of credit to Rolemaster, but one thing I really like is the weapons to armor. The way weapons react in this game to armor is fairly realistic, actually. It gives really good results overall. And that's one granular thing that you're not going to get in D&D. And that's one reason I like the combat tables, is you can get that granular result with each specific type of weapon against certain types of armor with the combat tables. And you're just not going to get that in a system that doesn't use tables. Not saying every system should use tables or every system should be that granular. Not saying I like that all the time, but I do think it's a cool thing. And if you want to know the reason to use combat tables, that's the reason, okay? And it's, it's cool. So that's the combat tables. And we're going to skip ahead. And here is the different types of monster attack tables. So you have beak and pincher, And the interesting thing about these is that they max out at certain results based on the size of the attack of the monster. So, like small attacks max out at 105, and medium attacks max out at 120, and large 135, and huge 150. Okay? And it goes for all these monster attack tables. So, you have beak and pincher and bites. And here's the brawling table. This is not necessarily a monster table, but this is the brawling table, and it works much the same way. Here's the claw talon table, fall and crush table, grapple, grasp, envelop, and swallow for monsters, horn and tusk. And here's martial arts. Martial arts works the same way. And martial arts sweeps, ram, butt, bash, and knockdown, stingers, tiny, trample and stomp. And then we get into critical tables. And these are one of the more fun things in Rollemasters, the critical tables and the fumble tables. So, the way this works is this is not a open-ended roll. This is a closed-ended roll. And there's no modifiers usually to critical tables. The higher the critical is in the alphabet, the worse it is. Okay? So A is less severe and E is the most severe. And again, on the combat charts, it'll tell you what table to roll on and how severe the critical is. So, if you were doing, I think earlier we were looking at, it told you to roll on the crush table, and I think it was D. So crush table D, and you would roll a D100 on here, and it would tell you what happened. So if there's always one of the worst ones is 66, which I think is cool. And that's one of the worst results you can get. Of course, the higher, the worse, but 66 is always really bad. Oh, man, sorry. My nose is always stopped up, man. I'm sure you can hear it in my voice. D on 66, blow to side of foe's head. If foe has no helm, you crush his skull. If foe has helm, you knock him out for 4 hours plus 20 hits. Now, all these are, again, up to the Game Master's interpretation. So he crushed his skull. Does that mean he's dead? I don't know. That's up to the Game Master to decide. But there's a lot of cool things here, like this one: blow, shatter, shield arm, bone severs vein and an artery, foe dies of shock and blood loss after 9 rounds. Cool stuff. Now again, this is really where you're going to kill things in Rolemaster. Most of the times, like I said before in the last video, most of the time you're going to die from a critical than you are from losing hit points. Okay. And as you can see, this, Rolemaster can be a very deadly game. And one suggestion I would have if you were playing with new players is give them some kind of fate points or fortune points where they could make some bad decisions to begin with and really get the feel for the game and not completely kill themselves. And, that would allow them to make re-rolls or ignore a critical or re-roll a critical or what have you. Whatever you would deem. I would recommend that for a first-time Rolemaster group. Unless they're all experienced players, then, let them die. Because one thing, and it's one big criticism that is fair, is that with the loaded front end of making characters and the time involved, which is really not as bad as everybody makes it out to be, but it's long enough. It's probably a bit longer than a D&D character, depending on the experience of the player. With the time involved, usually, it really sucks when you can literally die, one combat in one bad roll in Rolemaster. Of course, to be fair too, the same can be said for D&D, especially old school D&D. If you're playing by the book, by the rules, old school D&D, one fatal swing can take out most characters at first level. So this really isn't much different than that, to be honest, even though it seems like it really isn't, So, just keep that in mind, though, that The difference here is that, like, even high level characters are susceptible to the same things. So it doesn't matter how many hit points you have. If you take one of these really, vicious critical hits, you could die, pretty quickly. Your career is ended. So it's a really interesting thing, though, and I think it really changes the dynamic of combat compared to D&D. So that's that. Those are the critical tables. And it's a really fun aspect of Rolemaster, in my opinion. And then you also have fumble tables, where bad things happen. So here's weapon fumbles. Much the same thing. You look at the type of weapon up here. You roll a D100 and see what happens. You can break your, like this one. Let's see. Let's look at hand arms, one-handed. I don't know. 60. You slip without grace and lose 2 rounds worth of opportunities. Good luck, pal. Okay, stuff like that. Or let's see if you roll the same 100. Bad taste and poor execution. You attempt to maim yourself. Roll on the D critical hit. You hit yourself, basically. So yeah, there's some funny ones in here too. Non-weapon fumble table. Here's some statistics for monsters and creatures. Which, if you didn't have, I guess if you didn't have the creatures and treasures, this would give you a little bit of a start on that. I'm not quite sure why they're in the book here. They're talking about the original, like, tactical. We're at the very end of the book here. This is the appendix. They're talking about the original tactical sequence of Rolemaster, which is a totally different combat system or initiative system. And you don't roll, you just add up your modifiers to see who's going to swing first, and that's it. And I think its highest quickness moves first, if I remember correctly. And then you've got the movement and maneuver table back here, and damage record and index. And that's pretty much it. That's Rolemaster Classic Arms Law. And we've been going almost an hour here. So that's why I kind of wanted to talk about the world building thing at the beginning of the video, just to fill out the video a little bit. Again, I like videos that are a little bit longer. Let me know if you guys do too. It doesn't seem like any of you are complaining too much. And let me know if you guys are enjoying these reviews. It seems like everybody's liking it. If you liked this one, give me a thumbs up just so I know you like it. Again, I'm not really concerned about the algorithm or lots of views or any of that crap. I just like talking to you guys and talking about games I love. So anyways, I hope you guys have enjoyed this review or this overview of Rolemaster Classic. I should really call my reviews GM Cody's Reviews and Beer, because I'm always drinking beer while I'm doing my reviews. But anyways, I hope you guys have enjoyed this overview or review of Rolemaster Classic Arms Law. Next time, probably, we're going to look at the spell law, and we might look a little bit more at the world I'm working on or reworking. So I hope you guys have a good week. Until next time, we'll see you then.